Welcome back to the show with no name. I'm Bob Going. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is Gavin Murdoch. And we have an empty chair over here that should say Jim Nicosia. We don't know where he is. Sometimes he shows up, sometimes he doesn't. But that's just the way it is. So anyway, we're in the second hour here. We covered all the difficult matters of the world in the first hour. So now we're going to go into some cultural things. What's new on PBS? And Gavin?
PBS this week ran a wonderful series on the national parks in the United States. And they did a special segment of 1 hour on Mount Rushmore, which is something
which we were talking about just
on the radio show.
On the radio show.
That's right. And they.
To Jim's chagrin.
Yeah. If you haven't been there, you know. Yeah. But they talked about Gutzenborgen and his project there and all the difficulties they encountered in creating this. You know, they attempted to use some of the methods that other large-scale sculptors were made with, but this was such a huge one that he had to craft his own method of taking the scale down here and putting up on the mountain. Yeah. And it was interesting. I mean,
that's probably when your geometry class comes
absolutely.
Comes to some value. Huh?
Absolutely. The angle of dangle, it's just unbelievable. Yep. And they interviewed on the program some of the men who worked on the creation of it. Some of the jackhammer boys up there.
They must be in their 90s.
They were. You know, this is, I think it was maybe about 10 years ago. So, but they interviewed the guys and they showed them drilling and, you know, beehiving. That's what they did. They put a number of holes in and they used the blast it and how they did it. But the most fascinating thing.
What happens if the chin falls off accidentally?
Well, super glue. Super glue. What I thought was the best piece on there was right at the end, and they had done an interview with Gutzenborgen, and he said, you know, this is to last forever, but only in forever will it be correct, because I've created everything 3 inches too large, because every 100,000 years 1 inch will erode away. In 300,000 years the mountain will be as it should be.
Is that right?
Yep.
Wow.
And so he was planning ahead, making this last forever. And they also talked about all the care that goes into that every year, because the water and the cracks, they have to fill them, and they have to use, they're using silicone up there now, and they did some close-ups of it, and you can see the large number of lines that have been created up there. But that was really fascinating, especially after our discussion we had a couple of weeks ago about Mount Rushmore.
Well, the chances are that there is not that Frank Lloyd Wright type house at the top of Mount Rushmore that appeared in the Hitchcock movie.
No,
right?
no, there is not. And to go back a little bit to the original story we told a couple weeks ago, while we were there in '76, which was right after the several years after the siege at Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, the Sioux threatened to blow up Mount Rushmore. And as a result of that, because it's on sacred land, the Mahapasapa, which is the Sacred Mountain's motherland, and they had to increase security on the backside of the mountain to ensure that nobody was going to show up there and do that, because they're very concerned that AIM was going to attempt to remove Mount Rushmore from its present location.
And if you're Eva Marie Saint, don't wear high heels on the top of Mount Rushmore.
Oh, absolutely. But watching the series they did on the national parks, it was interesting when they were talking about who were some of the movers behind the creation of the national parks. Conservationists, certainly, but it was the railroads, because now there was going to be a destination to which to take people. Right. And the railroads gave money and land to the various parks so they would be maintained and created there so the railroads could take the American people out there. Back in the teens, they said that some phenomenal amount, I don't know, $1 billion a year, tourists were spending to go to Europe. And the railroads saw this as a great opportunity to have Americans see America.
Right, especially rich Americans.
You know, they said middle class and upper middle class. They didn't say rich, is what they were taking the people out for. And they talked about Muir, and as one of the early superintendents of the national parks, and how he walked the parks, and he said that every time I went for a walk, I saw another area that should be a national park. You know, you got Colorado, you got Yellowstone, you got Yosemite, you know, all these great natural wonders that we have here that the people in the East could only read about. Right. And now they had a chance to go there. And of course they did a good section on Teddy Roosevelt, because he was one of the early conservationists.
And of course he knew the West.
Yes, he did.
He had that ranch in Montana or South Dakota, or one of those places.
Yeah, yeah, he did, and he spent a lot of time there. And it's interesting too, because as a young boy he was very sick, and he forced himself to become an outdoorsman, which got him over these frailties of younger life, and you know, going to Africa on the safaris and all.
Hasten forward quickly there, he says to the cowboys.
he wanted to see what was around the next bend. You know, he was always looking.
And up to his last days, you know, he went down they call it the Roosevelt River now in South America. He charted a river that no one had ever been on before, and they knew where it ended up, and they kind of knew where it started, but what was in the middle, they had no idea.
Yeah.
And just a tremendous story of adventure. And he got ill and. Malaria or something, and he said, "Just leave me here." And they said, "No way, they're leaving the most popular president the United States had ever had in the middle of the South American jungle."
Yeah.
But on top of everything, on top of the adventure, the exploration adventure, one of the members of their crew murdered one of the other members of the crew and took off into the jungle. And Roosevelt says, "We're stopping everything, and we're going to go after this guy and bring him back to justice." And they finally talked him out of it. They said, "We don't even know where we are. You know, we're not." And as it turned out, like 2 or 3 weeks later, if I recall the story correctly, they're going down the river, and this guy comes out of the jungle, and he's hanging from a limb over the river, begging them to take him back with them. And they left them.
Justice.
But and he was in his 50s when that happened, I believe. And of course, he left the presidency and went on that year-long safari in Africa.
Yeah.
To bring home specimens for the National Geographic Society or something like that.
You know, it's funny they call him a great conservationist, but he killed more animals than
he was so excited at one point he got to go on one of the last buffalo hunts in the West, because a herd of buffalo suddenly showed up where it hadn't been in years, and we got to take advantage of this. What a guy. He's the story I just told about South America was basically a rerun of something that happened when he was out west. And there was a cattle rustler, and he was deputized by the local sheriff to form a posse to go after the cattle rustler, which took him several days to catch up with him. And they're on horseback, riding across the plains and the hills and camping along the river, tracking this guy, and he brings with him, among other things, a volume of the Greek historian Thucydides in the original Greek to read by campfire while they were resting. Yeah, that was Teddy Roosevelt, the ultimate Renaissance.
Oh, absolutely.
In one of the books, there's actually a list of the volumes he brought with him to Africa, and it was a huge case of books. It was like a couple hundred classics, and again, the original Greek, original Latin, whatever, and he's sitting there.
Wow. He was maybe Wilson, but pretty much the last president that we had that had such a vast knowledge and understanding
Well,
of,
he was
all things classic and all history.
And Roosevelt was, rather Wilson was a professor and a college president, but I don't think he had anywhere near the vastness of the things that interested Roosevelt. I think he was either just out of Harvard. Maybe just out. He was like 23 years old, and he decided to write the naval history of the
British
War of 1812.
Yep.
Okay, both sides.
Yep.
You know, all the battles, and they compared the ships and how much tonnage they had and how much armament they had and all this stuff, and who should have won this battle, who should have won that. Every battle of the War of 1812. The War of 1812 was remarkable for the United States because we were able, in the limited number of engagements there were, to hold our own with the British Navy, which was the greatest navy in the world.
And that was about the only thing we held our own with.
And this is at a time when, for example, the French were getting slaughtered by the British. So here's this upstart new country that had developed a navy that was so sophisticated that it was able to basically break even with Britain and had some notable victories. Anyway, he knows absolutely nothing about naval warfare when he decides to write this book. He had to learn everything from scratch, and he had to make his own analyses based on the raw records of these ships to come up with his determinations.
And what job did he hold in the federal government at one point?
He later became Assistant Secretary of the Navy, of course.
Yeah.
But written at the age of 23, it is still considered by far the finest analysis of the War of 1812 on both sides of the pond. And I've read it, and it is remarkable. It is absolutely remarkable. And you read it, and you do not think that this is written by someone who's the age of your youngest child. You know.
Yep. Yep.
He was a teenager when he wrote the definitive work on natural life in the Adirondacks, and did it by going to the Adirondacks every summer, getting his own specimens of the birds and the reptiles and everything else he came across. And that was published when he was at Harvard, I think, but I think he was 17 at the time when it was published.
The things that he did, and the understanding he took from these adventures that he had is remarkable. I mean, you ask, like you say, you take some high school kid, you take him camping a week in the Adirondacks, what's he going to say about it?
Right. The bugs are bad.
Bugs are bad, it got cold at night.
Yeah, and this guy is out, with bad vision even.
That's right.
Ended up being blind in one eye from a boxing match.
And he was supposedly one of the finest amateur boxers.
Yeah.
Just
amazing. And everything he undertook. He wrote a history of the West that is vastly superior to how the West was won, but along the same theme. Again, going to all the original sources and every skirmish between the Indians and the settlers and what it was about and who promised who what and who had the proper contract and who didn't, and all from scratch. Today it'd be difficult enough to write such a book with all with the internet available. This guy had to,
he was the internet.
This guy had to go to Boonville and go through the county courthouse records.
Yeah.
Where he found time to do any of this, I don't know. I mean, this is while he's, winning the war against Spain.
And you go to a place like that, you got kerosene lanterns burning at night, and that's what you're working by.
Yeah.
We today we've got 24 hours of light if you want it.
Right.
There they didn't. It was more difficult if you had kerosene. It was just an amazing guy, and that was really brought out in this part of the series, how important he was to having these national monuments created, these national parks, because these are sacred places that we hold, and
I've been to several.
We tend not to appreciate them as much as we should. You know what the largest national park in the United States is?
The largest? Is it the one in Maine?
The Adirondacks.
Huh?
The Adirondacks.
Oh, well, that's a state park.
State park, excuse me.
That's a state park.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Maine's huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
We were mentioning off camera that now that I've turned 62, I found out I'm eligible for my Golden Age pass for the national parks, lifetime pass for like $10 or $5, and that gets you, everybody in the car gets in for that price too. So unfortunately, there aren't all that many places. It's good down here. I think it's good for part of the Roosevelt site at Hyde Park, but not because part is run by the Park Service and part is run by the National Archives. So the Park Service,
you can't go here.
Park Service, you can get in.
Oh, you can't
That's
go
probably
here.
the closest. One or two of the Teddy Roosevelt sites in New York are available through this pass. What is the one in Maine? Arcadia National Park? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
That's the closest national park, but I've been to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons. Last year we were in Glacier National Park, and I've been to Rushmore, of course. Glacier is just amazing. We were there on a rainy, misty day. They have this road that goes up through this, I think it's called Sunrise Pass, that, on the two sides of the Continental Divide. Holy God.
Drive careful.
There's no way I could have driven. And as it was, my blood ran cold the whole way because I was on the side of the bus, and it's one of these 1930s short buses. It's not like your way, but I'm on the side facing the cliff, and it's at all times it's like 1,000 feet straight down, and I can't even see the small rock wall barrier.
So it looks like you're.
So I'm just looking down, or you could look the other way and just look straight up because this just keeps climbing and climbing. And the way they've done it, it's this whole broad valley. It goes. There's only one switchback. It goes up, and it turns, and it goes all the way up to the pass. So the ones, and it's miles and miles. It's like 30-something miles of just straight up. Then you get to the top. Now we're there in late June. There were several feet of snow at the top. In fact, the road had only been open a week or two at that point because of the snow at the top, along the top of the pass. There's waterfalls, there's water running right over the road, and there are places where the road has been washed out and they're fixing it and you got to go to one lane.
You can see the attraction of people from east at that time when they get a little glimpse of how
you can't even begin to imagine.
It's like a different world.
You're sitting at the top of the Rockies looking in 2 directions or 6 directions.
It's unbelievable.
Wow.
It's so different than you look here. Oh, look at that mountain! Look at these are pimples.
Absolutely.
Okay, you go out there.
That's exactly the word I used when I saw the Black Hills for the first time. I said the Adirondacks are pimples.
Yeah.
Then we get it. Then I take the bus up through Colorado and Laramie and all those places, and I say this is just unbelievable.
Can you imagine the feeling that those folks who were there for the first time, the settlers, when they would come around and what they saw, God's grandeur, it had to be more than overwhelming.
Absolutely.
What they saw, and the fact that they were able to accomplish it, on horseback, and these crappy broken down wagons that they've already spent 1,000 miles riding in. When they get out there, how small they must have felt. Yeah. To see that. I mean, it's
the first time I went out there in '73. That's exactly. I said, "How small we are."
Absolutely.
My brother Jay, several years ago, went backpacking in Yellowstone for a few days, all by himself, and at one point, it's dead quiet. It's kind of like it is right here. An occasional bird like that. But there's nothing. There's no sounds of civilization. There's no train going by. He's out there.
Yeah.
He's out there. and all of a sudden he comes across, and not seeing it, he comes across one of these mud holes with a hot spring mud hole, and this loud burp comes out of nowhere, and he said he jumped through the roof, and he says, now I know why the Indians didn't come here. They hear stuff like that. This place is haunted.
Yeah.
They don't want to be anything to do with it.
But what a fascinating place we have here, living on Earth, when you've got these things that go on, and the burps. You've got Old Faith. We got the other geysers. That what is inside the Earth, and what a small fraction of time in geologic history we must be living in. Because time for the universe is so expansive, so long, and we're just in this little, speck of time that we say is, well, we'll say 85 years, but that's in geologic time. It's nothing. It's not time enough for a lot of changes to occur. 10,000 years, some changes occur. 20,000, but our lifetime is nothing. They are. That's pretty quick when you're talking about millions of years for things.
10,000 years ago, which doesn't seem like very long, until you start thinking about it.
Yeah. Well.
But in geological terms, it's absolutely nothing. But 10,000 years ago, there were already people living in the Mohawk Valley, or at least passing through it and hunting.
Yes, there were. Yes, there were.
And they would have seen the Great Falls at Big Nose and Little Nose, where before the St. Lawrence thawed out, before what's now the St. Lawrence River thawed out, the Great Lakes emptied through this valley, through my yard. This was all underwater. That's why I got all this clay soil here in the valley. And this was a massive river that the geologists call the Euro-Mohawk, that ran through western New York. Western New York was largely another Great Lake at that time. Drained through here, and the where the Big Nose and Little Nose are, up between Yost and Nelliston, and the Palatine Bridge, was a waterfall twice the size of Niagara Falls.
And then you jump into the time period that the whites first came to the Valley of the Mohawk. Was a creek. It was a trickle. It was it was very shallow.
Yeah.
There were you could go fishing in it, but it was nothing compared to what it was then.
It's funny. We get the clay, and then the river slowed down when it hit the Hudson, and all the sand dropped out of it that had been carrying it over the glacial rock and everything else. And that was known as Lake Albany geologically. Lake Albany covered Albany, the whole Pine Bush area, and going all the way up to Glens Falls.
That's why it's all sand.
All huge Lake Albany, and they got all that sandy soil there left over from where the river slowed, going into the Hudson.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's 10,000 years, which is a long time, but it's not really a long time.
That's 10,000 years ago that broke up. The Ice Age was just ending. A mere 10,000 years ago.
Right.
Wow. Now, I hope you enjoy this geological lesson. But the world is a wonderful place.
Yep. And we are only here for a moment of time.
I remember on my bus trip, we went through Colorado, Wyoming, and ended up going to Salt Lake City. And that was a destination of a long, long, long day, as I recall. And oh my God, I saw the topography of that place, and I understood Brigham Young for the first time. When he said, "This is the place," this was the place. I mean, it was just that Great Salt Lake was just a fantastic oasis in between the desert and the mountains. And first night I'm there, actually I was only there one night, but there was I mean, we came over the Rockies into the Great American, I think that's the Great American Desert, into Salt Lake City. And looking back, the mountains just rose right out, went straight up off the Great Desert Plain. And there was still snow-capped in July, and the lightning storm. And the lightning is just jumping from peak to peak to peak. It's still the most spectacular thing I've ever seen.
Really, yeah.
And you know, just people in Salt Lake City just look up.
Another one.
There's another one.
Boy.
And you know, how short a period of time we conquered the West. It's just unbelievable. You know, putting that railroad through and.
There's
during the Civil War, right? That was being built during the Civil War.
Yeah.
Lincoln had time for the Transcontinental Railroad and the Homestead Act during the
Promontory, where they put the Golden Spike, was Promontory Peak, wasn't it?
What's
that? Where they put the Golden Spike?
Yeah, Promontory, Utah.
Utah, yeah. There is a series that's running, a weekly series on A&E. AMC. It's called Hell on Wheels, and it's a western, and it's all about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, and you know, there's always storylines to go along with it. But the thing that impressed me watching this every week is the horrific conditions that people lived in and worked in and survived in in the West during this time period. You know, we think, well, yeah, cowboys were out there, but you don't really get a sense of what the average Joe was going through. You work sun up to sundown. It was manual labor. The food was awful, and all the logistics that the railroads went through to provide that sort of horrible existence for their people. You know, bringing in the cattle herds to slaughter for the beef. You know, and the conditions, the environment that they worked in.
Well,
it's a great series.
Close because they had all those Chinese people.
That was on the portion of the railroad going from the west to the east. This is going from the east to the west, and it was, you know, well, they had a lot of the free men were working on the railroad. The free slaves worked on the railroad at the time, and it's just unbelievable. It's a great series. You get to catch it. Oh,
I'm just quoting Blazing Saddles.
Irish need not apply, but yeah, there were a lot of Irish on there, and there was a lot of conflict between the various ethnic groups that were working on the railroad. But if you get a chance, catch it. Hell on Wheels. It's on Saturday nights on AMC, and it's a good series. I used to watch Deadwood when it was on HBO.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever see Deadwood?
No.
Wow.
No. I learned about it in my history of the West class in college.
But it's not your John Wayne Western.
Well, Deadwood is where Calamity Jane was, I believe, and Wild Bill Hickok, and all those people who were nothing like Doris Day and Howard Keel.
That's right. You know, and it's funny. Calamity got her nickname because she'd been in a number of places that endured plagues coming through, you know, cholera or smallpox, yet she nursed in these camps where these plagues were going on out there. That's where she got the name Calamity. Every place she showed up was a calamity. And Wild Bill Hickok did meet his end playing cards.
What was he holding?
Aces and eights.
Okay.
Aces and eights. You know, and
Dead Man's Hand.
Dead Man's Hand. That's right, aces and eights, and it was, you know, he was a character.
Yeah.
You know, he was a larger-than-life character, and he was a ruthless SOB as well in there. I mean, most of these, you know, most of the lawmen at the time, they were former gunfighters that just went from one side of the law to the other. You know, sometimes there's not much difference between the cops and the bad guys. One guy's got a badge, and it was. That was a great series, though. Deadwood. It really watching the Roy Rogers and Wild Bill Hiccups and Bat Masterson and John Wayne on TV.
Not like that at all.
No, not like that at all. It's like, oh yeah, just like kind of like Lonesome Dove first broached that when that was put out.
What an excellent series it was. I got to sit down and watch it from end to end. I remember when it first came out, it was. I was deep into like the first 2 or 3 episodes. And then Mary announced, it's Ash Wednesday, we're giving up TV for Lent. but that was a sacrifice. I didn't see the rest of it for several more years. After that.
Yeah, but that was
That's like my Liberty Valance story. The first time I saw the man who shot Liberty Valance, I was visiting the maternity ward at St. Mary's Hospital. The baby became my goddaughter. Okay, and it was on, but came visiting hours are over. We got kicked out. All right, so I never saw how it ended. Then, in fact, it was well past visiting hours. Should have been over. So then the next time was. I think it was when Jamie was born. Jamie or Bobby, I forget. Jamie, I think. And I'm in the labor room with my wife, and the man who shot Liberty Valance is on.
You missed the end again.
I missed the end again, and it was not until about 20 years after I saw it the first time that I finally got to find out who shot Liberty Valance.
Oh, yeah.
I should have guessed.
Yeah.
Al Pilgrim.
Yeah. But Robert Duvall was just wonderful in Lonesome Dove.
That was the greatest performance I've ever seen, I think.
Yeah.
Oh man.
That was a
Of course, what has he ever done that was bad? But But the way he can move from genre to genre and part to part,
he makes a great cowboy.
Oh,
he really does that genre really, really well. My wife really likes to watch him in the westerns he's been in.
Did you ever see the one where he and James Earl Jones were brothers? I forget what that was called. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, they were actually half brothers.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they're meeting for the first time as adults or something like this.
Oh, that's great.
But talk about two pros.
Yeah.
Let's see. What did we see? Let's see. This week we saw our movie of the week was Now You See Me, which was Woody Harrelson playing a magician, and there were like 4 magicians pulling off all these great escapades.
Yeah.
Got great ratings from the hoi polloi, so we rented it. It wasn't that good. They gave it 4.5 out of 5, and I give it maybe a 3. It had some good plot twists, and the acting wasn't bad, but the effects were good. But the one the week before was just awful. It was Robert Redford, The Company You Keep.
Oh.
It's like it was. The first part of it was not too bad. The plot is basically this woman who's a former Weather Underground terrorist surfaces and is arrested, and they ask him to be the lawyer, and he turns it down, and the reporter wants to find out why he turned it down. And it's none of your business. Well, but it turns out because he was one of them too, and he had changed his name. Hope I'm not giving too much of the plot away, but I guarantee you shouldn't bother watching this movie. It's interesting because it's like a reunion of a whole mess of 1970s actors.
Yeah.
Susan Sarandon plays the girl, Redford, and a bunch of other faces that look very familiar from that same time period. And there's a scene where Redford is out jogging, and I said, this is straight out of The Way We Were, only now he's, 75 out jogging. And they had to change the time frame. You know, they keep saying this was 30 years ago when it wasn't 30 years ago. It was 45 years ago. You know,
had to get it fit.
It makes so 30 years ago when Reagan was president. This is you know, this has nothing to do with that time frame. This goes back
in the 70s.
You know, to 1970 earlier.
Yeah.
You know, when the you know, that
weather.
God, I think we were in high school when that townhouse blew up in New York City, right?
Yep.
From the Weather Underground.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's that's 45 years ago, 68.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's well, so it starts out kind of interesting as he tries to make his escape, and he's got a kid he's got to take care of, and blah 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 blah, and da 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 da. So it's got some. He directed it. You get into the last. It seemed like the last 4 hours of the movie, and all they do is talk. Oh, Julie Christie. Julie Christie shows up as another former Underground.
Loved her in Dr. Zhivago.
Well, she's still a good-looking woman, let me tell you. And it's a long time. I mean, she's got to be pushing 80, isn't she? Jeez.
Yeah, because Zhivago was 67, 68.
65.
That's my first date. I took to Dr. Zhivago. First time I went on a date.
It was 65 because she was up for Best Actress against Julie Andrews for Sound of Music. And they were best friends. So they sat together, I think, at the Oscars, Julie Christie and Julie Andrews. So that's 65, 1965. That is 48 years ago. Okay.
Okay.
So let's say she was 25 at the time.
So she's
still in her 70s.
Yeah.
Looked great. But he's trying to talk her into giving herself up to clear his own name. And it goes on and on. And they're in this cabin in the woods, and all they're doing is talking. That they had given us 3.5, and we gave it like a 1.
Well, back to Lonesome Dove there, you know, they did a prequel and a sequel to that too. Return to Lonesome Dove and the Streets of Laredo. And Return to Lonesome Dove was good because they had some of the same people in the Streets of Laredo. The first one that they did was okay, but that was a big deal when Lonesome Dove first came on, because it was a mini series, you know, and it just enthralled people, just like Centennial had done a few years previous when that first came out.
Oh, Nick Nolte was in that movie too.
Nolte, holy.
Speaking of miniseries,
Oh,
he looks like crap.
That was his career. Man for miniseries, But that was big back then when they have these miniseries on. You'd have to be there every night watching because you couldn't tape it because you had no tapes.
Well, the old ones, that's true.
You know, you had to see it, and they weren't going to be rerun at 2 o'clock in the morning for you to watch if you missed it at the first time. And you know, today you can tape anything you want and look at your leisure, and fast forward all those commercials, which isn't necessarily a bad thing sometimes. Skip those things. That was
the Wild West.
Yeah, West is interesting place.
I think Lonesome Dove gave a very realistic view of the way things were, and I think that's a lot of its strength.
Yes, it was grittier than most of the westerns before. It showed the endurance that people had to have, the practical day-to-day.
Remember he had to kill his friend for being a cattle rustler?
Yes, he did.
Had to hang his friend?
Yes, he did.
Because that was the only law you had, you know? You had to uphold it, or
there wasn't any.
Or there wasn't any law.
That's right. You know, and it took some of the glamour away that the westerns had built up to that time. You know, for all the guys, whether a good guy or bad guy, you know, that Blue Duck, you know, the half-breed Indian that was in there. That was Belle Starr. Was actually one of her husband's name was Blue Duck.
Was that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Belle Starr. That couldn't have been her real name.
No, her real name was
Julie Christie.
Yeah, and she didn't look like Eddie Starr any more than Calamity Jane did there. Yeah,
she was a good-looking girl, wasn't she?
Yeah. But I remember the first date I ever had, and I'm think it was 60. I don't think
Well,
it was
might have been,
65.
you know,
a little bit later.
Those
but,
days they used to play for 6 months at a
Yeah,
time, and then they'd be back.
and I saw it-
Zhivago was revived many times when
the
they used to do
60s.
that MGM cycle
Yeah.
of great movies, 2001, and
Yeah, they did. Yeah, you're right. But anyhow, I remember I took Cindy Dudak on my first date, and we saw
Who was
Dr.
that?
Zhivago. Cindy Dudak. She was from she went to the other high school in
Wait a
town.
minute, from Sloan Avenue?
Yes, my first date. Yeah, I was
went out with her.
I was a sophomore. She was a senior.
Yeah. She's a year older than me.
Oh, she's 2 years older than me. She had a
Married
little.
John Noble now.
No.
Yeah,
Is that who she got married to?
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I always wondered what happened to her. She had that little flat little
Yeah,
nose. She lived at what, 42 Sloan or
Yeah, something like
28 Sloan. Lived in a White House with had black
that.
wrought
Next to
iron.
the Oakles, because they were her
Yeah.
cousins.
Yeah, just up the street from List.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, we share a lot of things, don't we?
We'll talk more off camera. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I like Cindy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Cindy, you know, as long as we brought her name up on camera. She was involved in two of my really more notable events of 1974. We were both involved with the Adirondack Players, I think, at the time, and that's how I got to know her. And she needed an escort for. She worked for the county, and the county was having a day at the races in Saratoga at the time, at the harness track in '74. And so I said, okay, I'll go with you, you know, and then I reciprocated by taking her to SPAC the next week. Now, the night of our date at the track was the night Nixon resigned.
Oh, gee.
And so Nixon actually resigned while we were up there. We were all watching the TV instead of the race at that point. So so that was, and I remember I had lobster Newburg at the buffet. It was quite good. So it must have been in the clubhouse, I guess, at the
Track.
I don't know. That's the only time I've ever been there. So, and then, but the thing at SPAC was Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with the Potsdam Chorus. And Cindy had gone to Potsdam, and she was a couple of years out of Potsdam at that point, and but still knew some of the underclassmen who were in the chorus here. I get really nice box seats up in the second level, right behind the governor's box. In fact, front row of the box behind the governor's box. So there's a walkway in between us, but governor was Malcolm Wilson at the time. He's there with Attorney General Louis Lefkowitz and the Bishop of Albany.
Hot Fellows
Who
Club.
was Broderick at the time. Okay, yeah. So anyway, Cindy's all dolled up. She's got a long gown on. She's got her hair up, and I got my best suit on, whatever that was at the time. Well, probably my only suit. So we went all out. We went all out for this. The performance was out of this world. It was leave you limp, and of course there's no better piece of music ever written than Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. But it was the chorus was tremendous, and it was just breathtaking. So it was memorable before anything else happened. So we're still seated as it's ended and the lights come up, and first person to exit the governor's box is Attorney General Lefkowitz, and he's walking right by us, as close as I am to you now, and I nod to him in recognition, and he comes, being the politician that he is, and he was running for re-election at the time, he comes right over. I said, and he says, "Hi, I'm Louis Lefkowitz." I said, "I know who you are, General." I said, "I'm Bob Going from Amsterdam, and this is my date, Cindy Dudek," and he shakes hands with her, and of course I said, "Boy, am I scoring points?" Introducing her to the Attorney General of the state. Wilson is now exiting the box, and he says, "Let me introduce you to the governor." So Malcolm Wilson comes over and he says, I'd like you to beat Bob Going from Amsterdam and Cindy Dudek. So Governor Wilson comes over and shakes my hand and he says, Bob Going from Amsterdam? I said, yes. He says, are you Walt Going's grandson? I said, no, he was a cousin of my grandfather, but he never had any children, so we always considered him as close a relative as anybody else does. He says, I hope you're a Republican. I said, yes, I am, sir. He says, well, he says, if you're half as good a Republican as Walt Going, you're twice as good as most of them. And I said, thank you, Governor. And, they go on their way. All right. So this is August of 94 or 74 rather. October rolls around, and now Cindy is working at the county in the Medicaid office. Her hair isn't up. She's not in a gown. She's got kind of short, just
normal.
Blend into this office of 13 people, however many there were at the time. But a big office with lots of people in it. Lefkowitz is coming through campaigning. And he stops at her desk and he says, we've met before, haven't we? Weren't you at the Saratoga Performing Arts Center in August? She said, yeah, that's right. He said, well, nice to see you again. And I don't know whether he said Cindy or not. I'd have to ask her that. But, all right, so that's October of 74, right? I do not see Louis Lefkowitz again. And this is the first time I ever saw him. I do not see him again until July or August of 1980, when I'm at the Republican National Convention. And it's like the first day of the convention in Detroit, Michigan, and the New York delegation is getting together, having a little reception and a little organization, before we go on the floor in this big room. And I see Lefkowitz there. So I wander over and I said, hi, Mr. Lefkowitz. I'm, Bob Going from Amsterdam. We met once before. And then I get this little impish look on my face, and I said, you tell me. And he says, well, if I'm not mistaken, it was at the Saratoga Performing Arts Center, and they were performing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with the Potsdam Chorus, and I remember it was a great concert. And I introduced myself to you, and then I introduced you to Governor Wilson, and Governor Wilson said to you, "Are you Walt Going's grandson?" And then he looks at me apologetically and he says, "But I'm sorry, I forgot what your answer was." And I said, "This is a talent you cannot teach. You either have it or you don't. This is the master politician of all time, that he never forgets a face or a circumstance or the name that goes with it. It's just astonishing. Astonishing."
Yeah, unbelievable.
I mean, granted, Walt Going was the Republican county chairman in Montgomery County. He was a close ally of Thomas E. Dewey. But he had retired from the chairmanship of the party in 1958, okay? This is 1980.
That's right, yeah, 22 years later.
Holy moly.
No, that's why he got elected.
That's my Cindy Dudek
That's just
story.
Cindy Dudek, sorry. Oh, my.
Now, I guess her mother was an Oakle. That's how she was related to the Oakles.
Right, and Oakle lived right
right
up the street.
The one next door was
I
think her mother's brother. Now, I have to assume that the Oakle who's in my book, Where Do We Find Such Men, available at the Bookhound and at the Old Peddler's Wagon, is one of her uncles. But I've never asked her. So. I mean, I think all the Oakles in town were brothers.
There's one family. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
We got a lot of stuff in common.
Yeah, so I see her on Facebook periodically.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to track her down on Facebook.
John's in another play now. I just saw this morning. I haven't seen him in a show in years, and he's so good. I really have to make it an effort to catch him. But he ended up being like deputy motor vehicle commissioner, I believe.
Yeah.
Went up the ladder.
So they're still around here, huh?
Huh?
They're still around.
They're in, I think, in East Greenbush. For a while, they were out like Syracuse or someplace. He had the field office out there, and then when he went back to Albany as deputy commissioner, they moved to East Greenbush, and that was a long time ago. I think their kids graduated from school down there. So, so he's still.
So we went from Julie Christie to Cindy Dudek. That's a good.
Julie Christie, Cindy Dudek. I often confuse the two.
Well,
I have one other Cindy Dudek story. Anna was about in 6th grade, I think, and I believe we must have been going to a Willoughby Noble School of Dance recital, or maybe she was in it. She may very well have been in it, and Cindy. Well, John had worked every one of those shows for like 50 years at that point, because his mother, of course, was Mrs. Noble. And when at the end of the performance, we bump into Cindy, who had been working one of the spotlights, I think, and I introduced her to my daughter Anna, and I said, "See, Anna, I told you I dated girls who were shorter than you."
Cindy was short.
Wonderful girl. Still my friend after all these years. There you go.
There you go. Yeah. Yep. First date I ever had.
Wow. How'd you manage that? Did you?
Met her at a dance, and I got gutsy and asked her to go out, and she said, "Yeah." We saw. We weren't at the theater across from St. Mary's. We were at the one up the street with that balcony at the Tryon. Went to the Tryon, sat in the balcony. I don't think I moved all night. And we went out a few times after that. And then she was going out with Chucky Wirt, I think. I think that's who she ended up going to her senior ball with that year, Chuck Wirt. And but she was a real nice girl. Come over and we'd play some records on the record player.
Were you like a nervous wreck on your first date?
Man, I think I lost 5 pounds sweating that night. I was just, heck, first of all, I got a great-looking girl for my first date, and we were sitting there watching Chicago. I'm like, I was nervous.
That was a long movie, so you had plenty of time to sweat it out.
Yeah, and it was, it was a long movie, and I'd never been on a, sophomore in high school. Like we were. I think going through St. Mary, you couldn't go to a dance till you were in 9th grade.
Yeah, right.
Right. And then you go to CYO dances and stuff. And she'd come over to one of the dances at Scully. That's where I met her. But it was nice.
She probably just had walked up through the gully. It was a short trip.
Yeah. And my dad drove us and picked us up after the movie and everything. So I didn't have my license back then or anything. But I was really pretty proud. I'm only a sophomore. I'm 10th grade. She's in 12th grade. Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah. But it was a real nice girl. I thought
hot stuff of going with an older woman when I was 22.
Yeah,
23.
Yeah, she was. I haven't seen her in
Lo these many years.
Yeah. Let's look her up on Facebook then and see.
No, she's on Facebook.
Yeah.
Under Noble. Yeah.
Have to check.
Yeah.
Check. 12 o'clock. I gotta go to work.
Okay. Gavin has to go to work.
What a way to end it, though.
Jim is wherever he is.
Yeah. What a great way to end the show, though.
Huh?
What a great way to end the show.
We'll talk more. So that's Gavin Murdoch. I'm Bob Going, and we'll be back Tuesday with the radio show, and back hopefully with another podcast next week.
Maybe outside. Maybe outside. Again.
Hopefully outside. It's a beautiful day today. More of the show with no name.